Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Entrepreneurs Hangout podcast. Can you believe we are on season 3, episode 12? And I've got a great gal here to talk about loads of different things. I'm going to introduce Danute Debney Shaw. Say hi to everyone.
Hello, everyone.
And we just know that I just want to tell everybody we did get the scarf note because we just to say we've both in scarves because we love them.
Scarf.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I am really excited because I know that this had to be postponed, and I was like really jazzed to be able to have. We're kind of neighbors, an hour away, which is great for so many podcasters, some like the worldwide, right? But hey, we're an hour away.
Yes, so practically neighbors.
Exactly. Except for you have worse traffic than I do.
Yes, true.
And I think it'll be a little bit of interesting tidbit because you travel as much as I do from East Coast, West Coast, bi-coastal. So Danute, tell everybody a little bit about you, and then let's get some excitement going.
Well, about me, there's lots of different things I could tell. My focus in life these days is being a decision strategist. I have over 25 years, closer to 30, in management, organization, and law. And I have had the opportunity to gain a wide breadth of perspective on how people succeed, why they succeed, sometimes why they don't. I've had certain epiphanies of my own. Hence, I've written my book, which you can see over to the side of me, How the Tin Man Found His Brain, which is a collection of essays and commentaries. And it's not meant to tell somebody exactly how they must live their lives, or I found the grail and this is the way you must go. It was written to provide encouragement, support, new ideas, new thinking, sometimes a refresher on thinking. And even if you are not thinking along the same lines, the fact that you've examined and explored is already part of the purpose. So that is kind of what I'm involved in at this point in time.
I love it. So, okay, first of all, I know that in the show notes, you guys, we're going to tell you, give you the title of the book, so where you can find it. Danute, is it on audio? Is it on Audible yet?
It's very funny that you should say that because I have the hard copy, I have the soft copy, I have an ebook, and I am about to record, in fact, beginning the next week, an audiobook, which I hope to have done by the end of the year. I wanted to have it done earlier this year, but there are several things going on. I've been traveling a great deal. I will be traveling a great deal. And, with the other book and for conferences and other events. So that's sort of taken up the time. Plus, I'm trying to write my next book, which I cannot help but mention right now, which is, let me see, where can I show it? There it is.
Okay, right there.
Yes, it's hard to see it because of the nature of it. It's called The 5 Lives of Agnieszka. And what it is my grandmother's story of starting out in a Downton Abbey context, going through the Russian Revolution, the First World War, the Second World War, a Siberian labor camp, a Middle East holding camp, and finally the United States. And the question is, does she find her happy ending? So the book will be a novel format, which I have not utilized before. However, it is really allegorical. It is really going to show how one does build resilience, how one gets through these situations. So it's really very much on par with the work that I've been doing. And, part of my own background, just to throw in here, I mentioned professionally what I've done, but I've come from a family that has gone through a great deal of its own adversity and challenge and managed to make it through in a variety of exciting ways. And all of us, if you just scratch the surface a little bit, go through a couple of generations, people have been through quite a bit. It doesn't have to be a war. It can be health. It could be, dramatic relationship challenges, illnesses. There's enough back there for us to draw upon and know that if they made it through and we're here now, we can do it too, professionally, as whether we're entrepreneurs, we're in business, or whether we're talking about our personal lives, because I really work on both sides of that track.
I like that. So, and I'll talk a little bit about it. Just when you brought that up, it's like, if this family can make it through, anybody can make it through. And I don't know that we talked a little bit about one of the works that I do is in the prisons. And I've got my business in a box. My goal is to have business in a box in every single prison out there because I love working with the reentry team. And the reentry community it's a very, very hard thing. But the thing of it is I would love to be able to get your book and give it out to some people, because that's where it's at. It's like, how do you find that tenacity? How do you find that strength? And you got
Well,
to sometimes dig down deep.
exactly. And if you really build from within. And I talk about that in the book a little bit. It's not that our parents tried to ruin us early on in life. They tried to get us onto a track. And in doing that, and they need to, that's part of their job. But in order to do that, sometimes there are aspects of ourselves that we lose. Creativity sometimes goes a little bit off to the side. Imagination, that subjective awareness and reality within ourselves that we kind of know. Kids sort of know things sometimes because they're comfortable. They're not restricting themselves. They're not telling them, oh, no, that's just this, that's just that. Now, that doesn't mean it can't be mingled with imagination and fantasy, because they haven't sorted all that out. But the point is that in trying to learn how to live here on the planet, whether our parents were really great parents or just people who were having children and trying to do the best they could, they don't always support, and have not always supported, all of the gifts that we come into the world with. And sometimes we need to discover those again and realign those and bring those back to center to use as important core resources. And it's amazing. My brother got his first job, I think, partially because, and this was in the IT area and in management consulting, but partially because he played the piano, and they loved the fact that the intervals that you work with in music have a certain similarity when it comes to the world of the internet and of the mechanics of that kind of technical thinking. And they loved the fact that he did that, and that was just a whole different part of his world. But he brought that, that ability in with everything else. So that's just, an example of what I'm talking about here.
I love it. So now, when did your book come out?
Oh, it's been out. It came out during COVID, actually. And this is why I had a time trying to promote it, because I did have to kind of run around toward the tail end of COVID. And now what I'm doing is promoting it in Europe. In fact, I just came back from London and Oxford. There were 18 signings in 4 days in 2 cities. I'll be hopefully in Scotland in March. I'm going to be in Dubai in April. I am a keynote speaker for the HEAL conference at that time in Dubai, and I'm very excited of being out there. I am going to be in Toronto later in the year, and possibly in India. So I am really moving it up.
That's awesome. That is awesome. So if you had to, we can either do one of 2 things. I like, we're talking about the book, so let's maybe stay on the book just a little bit. Like, you can either maybe summarize it, or I got a good one. What if you had to pick like a favorite subject title, something, go back, pick something of one of your favorites about your book. What would it be?
Well, what really excites me when people read the book and get back to me is they say things like, oh, I was reading this story, because I tell a lot of different stories in there. Some of them are examples in my own life. Some of them are influences that I have had on my life. So this is one, the subtitle to this is One Attorney's Path for Perceptual Development. And that's really kind of what it was for me, although it's not an entirely autobiographical piece. There are just all of these illustrations. And what I really love is when people say, I was reading this and it made me think of blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, perfect. Wonderful, exciting, because the chapters are actually very small. They're short, and they go from one, tiny bit of insight to another tiny bit of insight to another tiny bit of insight. So no one chapter is like, this was the chapter. It all talks about this process of this decision making that we do, and how we make how we make those decisions. I'll give you an example in a professional, how this applied in a professional context. I'll tell you one quick story. A woman came to me. She was in a finance group, and she was incredibly frustrated with her team. She was very expansive in her thinking. She had all of this finance background, very left brain training, etc. But she was more of a creative thinker. Her team was very concrete in their thinking. They weren't bad people. They weren't people who don't know how to think. They were good employees, but just not willing to be able to stretch outside of the box. And so she came to me with a lament. The problem was that her company wasn't prepared to provide a series of, for example, workshops or little seminars, let's say one a month or one every couple of weeks, to try to work with the group to get them to a comfort level with a little bit more of an expansive vision. They weren't ready for something like that, but she nonetheless was feeling extremely at the end of her tether. So what did we decide to do? This is not a final solution. By no means would it take care of everything, but we decided to design an approach to move the box. So they were still thinking in the box, but now the box got bigger. So their comfort level remained within the area that they are most accustomed to engaging and working with. And yet they were taking more into account. Now, that might seem simplistic, but it wasn't something that had occurred to her to do. And we kind of worked a little bit on the ideas of what would be involved. And she found that very helpful. But that was really just a quick in the moment sort of solution. The better solution would have been to, create more comfort for folks who are working with us. For example, you've heard the Myers-Briggs test, right? Personality.
I've taken it.
Yeah. And I think most of us have during the course of time. I don't know if there are other instruments now that are comparable, but that was sort of out there at the front running of its kind. And it was very exciting to see, oh, you're this type. I'm this type. People would run around and they'd share what types they were. Well, P.S., when you start working together, great that you now have a label for your type, because you've already had a hint that you don't get along with this person. They want things kind of loosey-goosey. You need things really tight. You've already got ideas on what's going on with them. Well, now you have the understanding of what lies behind that. However, and this is why I love working in the how are you going to make it all happen? How are you going to cohese this? How are you going to work with these people? How are you going to make it fun rather than a drudge? You have to, search for other elements within yourself and within the group that we can riff off of. We can start there. It's like negotiation work, which I have done quite a bit of, because as an attorney, I have been involved in negotiation work. Now I do contract work through Washington and a little bit in New York. So I still have my hand in the law, although that's a separate track for this. But it's near and dear to my heart because I've done it for many years. And I've had a lot of exposure. But in the negotiations category, it really helps to drill down to where you both agree. If you're coming together and it's going to be one of these kinds of interactions, there are ways to prepare for this. And again, when I'm working with individuals or with groups or with, a company, I assess what it is that the weak points are. What are the challenges? What are the objectives? What is your side of this versus somebody else's side of that? And it doesn't have to just be a negotiation with customers or people outside. Sometimes it's within your organization. There is a challenge because there are certain fears or there are insecurities and this is where the kind of, fecund ground lies, because it's so easy to just superimpose a platform. Okay, we're doing the lean platform or we're doing this platform, but that does not take into account people's subjectivity in engaging the platform. And I understand why the resistance is there to enter that subjective arena, because it's less quantifiable. It's, and it is different in different cases because different situations require a different approach. Different groups of people require a different approach. And sometimes, in my position, I don't recommend things just because I like them. I'd like to see them happen. I have this one platform and we're going to just do this. If you just overlay this, it's going to work. No, sometimes something that, going in a direction that wouldn't necessarily be something I personally would want to see happen. But if that's what would work, if that's what's shown already, its little kind of elements of being able to really, really work for them, well, then that's what you need to do. Because things are not often that black and white. There's a lot of that territory, around the picture. So I work in helping to, unfold a platform that people want to put in place, for example, with their team in whatever group they are in. I can do that. I have worked in situations where people have had individuals that had some challenge. So maybe you had to kind of focus on a group of them and discuss and role play and do some kind of, encouragement for them that would make them feel more supported and more integrated in the larger group and hopefully function better. Now, I'm not a psychologist, but a lot of this is just plain old performance stuff that is out there. And it's just a question of putting it together in a configuration that will work for that group. So things like that.
I like it. Well, you and I have been around enough that it's like, when people, somehow or another, you're getting stuck, you're not moving forward. So you've got to be able to have somebody help you strategize to get out of that. And also I think not just strategize to get out of it, but somebody that's looking from the outside. You
From
know,
a different
they're
perspective.
so in it. They're so in it.
Well,
And that sometimes they get, they just want to
right.
butt heads and dig in.
Well, and just to give a different flavor from a different angle, I met with somebody casually last year and got sort of into what ended up being a mini consultation, although that wasn't necessarily the intent of the original meeting. And this person is quite a powerful, active individual out in, again, this happens to be finance. Not everything has to do with finance, but this happened to be. At any rate, this individual, you know how many of us come from backgrounds where we didn't get the support. We weren't encouraged. We were even sometimes belittled, or there were no real mentors or people who had our back when we were trying to develop. That is such a common story that you hear all the time. Well, in this gentleman's case, it was just the other way around. He came from a relatively affluent background. He had all of the opportunities. He'd worked very hard. He wasn't a young person at this point in time, but he had just said to me that his career was ruined because he trusted somebody who was not trustworthy. And see, what this says to me is he's got a little bit of challenge with the way he's discerning, because I mean, when he played the scenario out, I thought, oh, and you didn't really see that coming? Really? And he's a smart man, a capable man, and a very successful man. But because there were situations, there were contexts that in some ways he's been spared, even that he didn't even have to go through this. It's not that he didn't work hard, but do you know what I'm saying? He just sort of logically, naturally kind of progressed, and he thought he could
That's
trust
actually
this
interesting.
person. And you see, and the point is that he is somebody who needs to not necessarily work with me, but whatever he's working with, he needs to be able to enlarge that inner trust that he can have in himself,
for sure,
to be able to assess situations and people in a slightly broader way. Again, you don't have to jump to judgment. That's why I always love the word discernment, because judging has such a negative context to it. But the discernment of what you're really dealing with, how does it feel? What does it look like? What are you getting? What's concrete? What's in black and white? And what's something that's saying, oh, let me take a closer look, or let me pull back a little bit and take a bigger picture on this, rather than go, oh, wow, this looks good on paper. It's logical. It's rational. We're doing it. And that's not always enough, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. And it's like, you know what, especially in business, I'm going to say that I feel that a lot of people, I'm kind of a waste weirdo. So then what happens is like, I'm going to use as an example, but an entrepreneur comes and they want to have a startup, or they want to do something, or more importantly, like they've been flustered and they've been trying for a year.
Yes.
And what happens is, unfortunately, they've wasted so much money with all of these mistakes that could have been avoided by finding the right person, finding that person to consult, to talk to, and to helping make some decisions. The decision strategy, where does it come from?
Well,
so that's,
it can be very, very important. And it can be done in a number of ways. I'm always happy to refer people if I feel that there is somebody who either has an approach or a technique, or something that would be of specific value to them, or a tool that would be of specific value to them, because it isn't a one size fits all. There are all sorts of programs and webinars and this and that, and I've seen some of them. They have some great points. Some of them are wonderful. Some of them I don't know, because maybe they didn't resonate for me. But the bottom line is that you have to reach a point where you can trust yourself to be making these decisions. And one of the easiest ways to do that is bit by bit by bit, is taking stock of where you have made some wonderful decisions and how you felt when that happened. And what did you take into account? It's not always going to be the same, number of factors that you're looking at. But if you can get to a place where you feel I want to say that you can rely on yourself.
Yes.
That also helps you pick who could help you, because we all need somebody who's going to provide information. That's one of the things for attorneys. If you don't know enough about a certain area that you're going to be engaging, well, then your commitment must be to learn about that. You've got to go find what it is you may not know, and then explore. And maybe that'll show you something else you don't know to take into consideration, to be able to either, that's when you're representing clients. I usually have worked kind of on the back end, sort of more in, in the discovery of what how one will build a case, because I've worked on very large cases. So I've not worked in the trenches in litigation in that fashion. But that's the kind of thing that, that one would need to engage. You need to find out what you don't know. And you need to, and then you have to make it your own. You have to own it. It can't just be something that's like plaster that slides down your face. This was the solution here. And that's why I have hesitation with platforms or programs where this is all you need. These are the 7 steps. These are the 12, because they can be great, but they won't necessarily always work in every instance. And it still depends on how you're going to want to implement them. So there's that piece missing sometimes. People just think mechanistically they can do these things. And in some contexts, that's absolutely all you need. Absolutely all you need. But the danger is in thinking that there's anything that you can find that'll solve all of those questions. Or look, sometimes you need to go back to counseling. That happens too. If people are very confident, they're not very confident. There could be some other things that are going on. And I can always tell with the client when we have all of these solutions right in front of us, and it's kind of like, yeah, but I don't know. Well, what don't you know? We've already gone through all of them. So there may be something else that's happening there. And there's nothing wrong in doing that, in sort of cleaning up the basics. One woman said to me once, every time I use my intuition, it always goes wrong. Well, logically, it can't always go wrong.
No, right.
There's some impediment, some fear, or some doubt, or you confuse yourself because of, some of your history or previous experiences, so sometimes you need a different kind of support to sort of help you get on track, but assuming that you're in a place where you do feel comfortable making your decisions. In fact, one gentleman said to me, and he was the owner of a large, I don't know how large the company was. He had founded this company. I don't know how long he was going to stay with it. He was essentially an entrepreneur, but he was setting it in motion. He said, and I was talking to him about this notion of incorporating that perceptual awareness, that thinking outside the box, learning to integrate that with all the rational stuff, right? And he's like sort of listening, like, Then he said to me, well, when I sit in with one of my regional sales reps and I'm listening to this new potential customer we're going to have, right? And he says, I can tell, I've thought about it. I can tell within 5 or 10 minutes whether it's going to close or not. And that's irrespective of whether they're thinking we're the best thing since sliced cheese, or if they're saying, I don't know, I'm not sure. Because in the I don't know, I'm not sure situation, sometimes all they need to do is have, more clarity, or understand a little more unfoldment, or realize what kind of support they will have if they risk in this direction. And sometimes the others who are like, wow, this is great, I love it, I can't wait to tell others, so glad I found you. And he can just tell, not because it's over the top expression. He's reading people. He's using everything. He's listening. He's gaining the nuances, and he's getting a sense of it. And he's developed his skills so well over time because there are lots of clues. Some of them are the obvious physical clues that we've learned. If somebody's going like this, well, their pad closed off, right? There are those clues, but sometimes it's more subtle, and sometimes through a little more questioning, or a little bit like try and tell them a little about this, see what happens there. You've got to be able to read the situation. And that's part of what this gentleman wasn't used to, those nuances. He was used to seeing the stuff black on white. This is a business person. This is this. It should work. Not always. No.
No, but what also, sometimes when you've got struggles, if perhaps this particular gentleman, you said, affluent family, and, perhaps there were no issues, there were no troubles, there was nothing. He didn't have to use his own intuitive gut. He didn't have to, hey, I remember when at 16, I'm just making stuff up. That didn't go over so well for me. And then I made that same mistake at 21. Okay. So maybe his family, there was no trouble to get out of and learn from. That is part of it.
Exactly. And that was part of the point that I was making. He was like third generation affluent. So I'm not saying nothing ever happened in his life, but he didn't really have to kind of ever fly by the seat of his pants that way, or worry or wonder, or know that, that the outcome, what he can do next is contingent on this very important next outcome. Well, it doesn't work. He studied, he did well in school. I mean, he was very capable, very knowledgeable, intelligent, skilled man. But as you just mentioned, and I pointed out early on, he didn't have that, it's that little grit that you have in the oyster that makes the pearl, and for some of us, unfortunately, we as humans often learn. I spent 5 years working for the federal bankruptcy court as a law clerk judicial assistant. I got to see lives fall apart and get put together or not. Businesses fall apart, put together or not. Like with businesses, large and small. Some were big, big corporate entities we were dealing with. That sometimes it's just small, more entrepreneurial level, kind of startup, different businesses. But the point is, you can't just sell off what's a kind of a weak asset and expect everything to work. What I learned is the companies that really could put it back together, reorganize and move forward were willing to look more closely and more deeply at what was and wasn't working. So, we're talking about a couple of different things. We're talking about the intuitive process, but we're also talking largely and more encompassingly about being willing to be outside that box. Look at more than what you're seeing right in front of you and see what's happening in this situation. And how can you work to address that? Do you need to let people go? Do you need to bring more people on? Do you need to talk to people? Do you need to restructure how they report to one another? And some, to be fair, some companies did also try that. They weren't just selling off their assets. But the deeper they could go and the more willing they were to work with the situation. And see, people say to me, do you work personally or professionally? Well, it's both, because you bring your personal self to the table, is what you're doing. You're bringing yourself in there. So your own fears, your inclinations, your doubts, your insecurities. And I got to tell you, in the years that I've worked for other companies and other organizations, which I've learned a great deal from, there's no class you could teach like being out in the world and watching people move and shake it and run their lives.
It's real life.
Right. And you can see the people who can make it happen because they're willing to put the investment into making it happen. And that's one of the challenges. If you were to ask me, what are the challenges that I found in working with people in organizations? I have right now, somebody has asked me to look in on a particular, it's a small business, not a very big business. The thing is that they have previously already dismissed people who had very concrete ideas. I don't know what they'll think about mine, because mine are usually a combination. You're working with the mechanics, absolutely, but you're also trying to build in greater perspective, perception, and vision for where this will go and what it will do. All the people that I have found who've been able to promote that in their lives and in their work have used all of their talent and skills and been willing to do it and been willing to make the difficult decisions. One of my biggest challenges is when people don't want to make that commitment. They just want everything to be fixed. It's like, okay, we're going to do this. It's going to work, right? It's going to work now. Well, only if you're going to work to implement it.
Correct.
And you're going to keep it going. And it doesn't have to be a drudgery. This doesn't have to be a boredom. This can be, you can make it more interesting for your team. You can make it even fun at times for your team. And you can keep the serious work done. Get it going. It's like what is it? That company in China. It's an IT company of some kind. I'm not really sure. They've got cats in the workplace. Now, I'm not saying everybody should get cats in the workplace. I remember
seeing like a TikTok or something on it. Yeah.
I'm not saying that's the answer, but I'm just saying that he hires people. They have to be able to like cats and not be allergic to cats. And he said the skills I can teach them, but they have to be able to like the cats. And he said they have more productivity and and more calm. And then they have more breaks, and then they play with the cat and feed the cat and whatever. Well, so that's just one out there solution. I'm not saying should be a generic solution of any kind, but this was a man thinking well beyond. And as it turns out, as a byproduct, his company's doing fabulously.
That's great.
And I'm not saying it's all due to the cats, but that's one way that he's found to make his people happier, to make his people more comfortable, to make his people feel more at ease where they're working, and they can just dig in and work those computers, because they're on computers all day long, dealing with various kinds of programming. So there are different answers for different situations.
Sure.
And, my involvement is generally in facilitating. More than an expert, I consider myself a facilitator. A facilitator based on the fact that, yes, due to my decades of experience, I've seen a lot of these kinds of scenarios. And then when I look at the person or persons involved, I can see how they differ, how they are similar, and what unique direction they may need to go in. And that's something that they're going to really have to carry the ball with, but we help to develop that together.
Yeah. Before we run out of time, it comes back to me on this, which is, it's also teamwork. I guess the teamwork is the dream work, and we know that.
Yes.
But trusted advisors, when you hire on people, you need to be able to trust, in my opinion, It's like, trust
Yes.
the fact,
Yes.
because I am not a stand on your thumb, person. I'm like, listen, I've hired you. Yeah, I've given you this. This is what you can do. I'm not a delegator. And or a micromanager, right? I
The
can delegate.
micromanager is what you're not.
Right.
Yeah. You expect
And
them to do it.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But the thing of it is too, it's also decision makers and having people on your team with different skill sets and different mindsets. You and I might not see eye to eye
right.
in everything, but
right.
but I trust your opinion. I'm like, hey, Danute, you've got this.
Right.
This is yours. You got this. This is you.
Right. And the thing is, that's another, see, I've worked with some leaders at times in various contexts where I've had exposure to them. And some of them have been amazingly insecure. You think he's up in this position. He got bumped up. He got bumped up. Now he's kind of like running the show. And that's even in family businesses.
Sure.
Where, you're sitting here and that's not what this person is best at. It's not what he's comfortable at. He doesn't know how to galvanize, as you suggest, the team. And that's another thing. Leaders have to be willing to not just delegate, but to respect that their team is going to produce
100%.
and produce well for him. And in order to do that, they have to be allowed, they have to be encouraged, they have to be paid. They have to be paid for it.
100%.
All of that is very, very important. But that also takes courage, guts, and confidence on the part of the leader. Now, when you say going for, guidance or advice, like for myself personally, if I have an introductory meeting with somebody who, whether this is for a company or it's for an individual, this is when I was, doing more of it. As I say, right now, I'm not doing as much, but whenever I do it, I always make sure that it is something I feel I can contribute to. That's another thing you have to look out for with people who do provide advice. Those people who think they can help everybody all the time with everything. In fact, there's a little chapter in my book. Toward the end of my book, I talk about business decisions of different kinds. And sometimes getting the business is not your answer, right? Because you can't help them. You're not going to be able to help them. They're going to be disappointed. And it's the same thing with people in business when they take on clients. Sometimes you don't want that client, and you learn early on
100%, 100%.
that client's going to cost you more in time, energy, effort, and money ultimately because of what you're expending on it. So, again, yes, I think you do need to find guidance. Well, you can research it. You can learn what other people have said about certain groups. This is my advice. Learn what others have said. Do have an introductory discussion before you ever engage, and don't just go ahead, book it right away. No, get a sense of how the feeling goes. Is this a compatibility? Because sometimes it's a question of just communication and compatibility that's not really quite there. People are sort of not really meeting. They're not bad. They're not but you need to find somebody that you can work with if you're getting support, that you really can have this cohesion. They already understand you. They know what your objectives are. And if you're discussing a certain strategy or a certain approach, the other part of this that I want to just stress before we get done is it's not about addicting people to having to have constant support. You see, support is there when it's needed. Support is there. It's wonderful, and it should be there. But there should be a point in time when people can cut. It's like therapy. It's like people who are in therapy for 40 years.
Absolutely.
You can't do that. And goodness knows I like the idea of continuity. And I had a client for 5 years, and we tapped it down. At the very beginning, she needed a lot of support. And now once in a blue moon, she contacts me and she's flying. She's incredibly successful. I'm very happy for her.
Well, my dad would say something funny, but I can't repeat it on this podcast. It's something about, cut it off at the, we're talking like mamas and breastfeeding. It's, it's time to put the,
and if
you got it.
And if you're taking someone on who's going to work with you for, let's say, a year or two or whatever, give it a little time for the romance, so to speak, and see if it's a happening thing. And if it is, then fantastic. Then maybe you just need to check in periodically, or maybe like I was suggesting with that group, you need to, to have somebody help present this newly developed direction through the group, through some intervals. You figure all that out, and you can do that pretty early on without having to commit yourself to tons of money with somebody who will not be able to help you.
Absolutely. Well, Danute, you have been just a plethora of information for people. And I can't wait for them to get your book and follow you on LinkedIn. That's where you and I most connected. And so the show notes are going to be in the show notes will be in the descriptions and everything tomorrow. My VA will fix that. And I'm really, really glad to see you. So that is awesome.
Well, thank you so much. I've loved being here. Thank you.
Thanks. You guys, all right, guess what? Same time next week, 3:00 Eastern. And if you'd like to be a guest on my show, hit me up. I'm always looking for interesting people with great entrepreneurial stories. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.